We are live. Mark is the audio though, but yeah, that's fine. Hi everyone, welcome to the AMA with myself and Mark, talking about two of Mark's favourite things, which is elections and tax, because he's such a fun guy. So we are going to kick things off with talking about the UK budget and kind of what that means for people in the crypto space and us as a business in the UK, and then we're going to move on to the US election and what that means for crypto generally, as well as within the US. So I'll let Mark kick things off because I know he loves UK tax law so much. He's actually an expert in it. So I'll let you lead us out with some information about the UK regs or UK tax that was released last week.
Great. Well, I've already been introduced as a mushroom, but for those who don't know me, my name's Mark. I'm the General Counsel at Alkimi, and prior to becoming a DGen, I was indeed a tax lawyer. So yes, budgets are my bag. While we're on the topic of bags, can someone please explain to me why everyone keeps wanting their bags to go to Valhalla? For those who don't know, Valhalla is the Norse, one of the Norse heavens, and therefore to go to Valhalla, you have to be dead. This is continuing to confuse me, so please do let me know what on earth that is supposed to mean. On to the more straightforward matters. We've dealt with death, so the only two certainties in life, death and taxes. Covered death, so let's do tax.
There's also death taxes.
There are death taxes as well. Yeah, it's that cunning hybrid that gets you from nowhere. So the UK budget was big. There was a lot of speculation, as there always is. It's a bit like, for those who follow football, transfer deadline day, who's going to move, who's not going to move, how much is it going to cost? The answer was, to the last question, 40 billion, which has predominantly been raised through about four main changes. For people in the UK who own crypto assets, by far and away the most relevant tax is capital gains tax. Without going through all the details of how the UK tax system works, generally when you sell, bridge, transfer your crypto assets, if you make a profit, that will be subject to capital gains tax. The capital gains tax system in the UK has two tiers, a lower tier and a higher tier. They were 10 and 20%. They're now 18 and 24%. So yeah, that's a relatively significant increase, 80%, the difference between 10 and 18 at the lower level. But when you compare it to the rate of UK income tax, which is a maximum of 45%, it is still far, far cheaper to make your money via crypto and pay tax than to do it, for example, having a salary. So I think that was at the far lower end than most people speculated. Some of you will know that Alkimi was involved in Zebu Live, and I chaired a parody of Lord of the Rings, which contained a number of tax experts. And in that, there was speculation that rates would go up to 39%. So 24% being the highest rate is still very beneficial. There were some changes that impact businesses in a slightly more negative way. As many of you know, Alkimi's headquarters is in the UK. Both Chorley and I are currently sitting in our London office. And the big change for businesses is that employers' national insurance contributions, which is the amount of tax companies pay on individual salaries, went up to 15%, which is fairly significant when you have a sizable wage bill. It's not backbreaking, but it does mean that for staff now, the staff obviously pay income tax and their own national insurance contributions. We also have to pay national insurance contributions. So while this isn't a crypto specific tax issue, it certainly does impact businesses like ours that want to employ people. We are a growing business. Chorley, do you know roughly, your COO, what the sort of employment increase has been in our team this calendar year?
It's over the last 12 months. It's probably at least a third. So.
Yeah, we're a growing business. Many of you will know that we've had a very successful year with lots of things that we've announced, some things to be announced. Apparently, not everything to be announced on this call. I have been pre-warned that there are certain things that are still subject to NDAs. So we won't be telling you everything that's going on, but it has been a very successful start to the year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from a perspective of where people thought the tax regime was going to be. There was a lot of talk of a very high capital gains tax, and that was almost to kind of feel people out. And then when it wasn't that bad, everyone saw a sort of 25% increase effectively on the capital gains tax as a win, but obviously it's not ideal. And I think from most people in the UK who hold cryptos, that's probably the one that's going to sting the most, especially coming into a bull market. It comes in April, right? So
No, actually, this was a surprise. She was very quiet, Rachel Reeves, the British Chancellor, for those who don't know. But actually, the capital gains tax change came in with immediate impact, literally from the moment that she sat down. So we have got a very complicated system this year in the UK, where if you made your disposals before the 30th of October, you'll be subject to one tax regime. And if you made them from the 30th of October, you will be subject to a different tax regime. The good news, a bit like Valhalla, I guess, is that you only pay tax if you've made profit. So, that's a good starting point. Obviously, for those of you who've held ads long term, we are heavily up this year. So you should all be in profit. We hope you are. And for those profits, we hope that they will continue to increase. So if you sell your ads, you pay tax. So, perhaps don't sell your ads, but we don't give investment advice, merely sort of conjecturing as to what tax you may or may not have to pay. I think I don't want to get too involved in the details, but I will just whistle over a couple of other acronyms that people may have come across in the budget. The first one is BADR, which is Business Asset Disposal Relief. What that means is that if you own a business asset, often shares in a business, for example, then you pay a lower rate of tax. That relief is being tapered, which means it is being reduced. It currently limits tax to 10%. Next year, that will go to 14%, and then the year after to 18%. So for people who own crypto for business purposes, and yes, you can own crypto for business purposes, there are increased tax rates, but it is still more efficient because you will still pay less tax than you would do if you owned it just in your normal bag. Another one is BPR, or Business Property Relief. One of the things that we don't talk about enough of in the UK is that the UK has a very attractive regime for businesses involved in cutting edge technology like Alkimi. There are lots of tax reliefs and incentives that we qualify for. One of the big ones is what's called R&D, research and development, where the government literally pay us because what we do is at the forefront of technological evolution. I mean, we haven't captured a rocket, which was pretty cool, but we are, doing things to move real world assets onto blockchain. And another tax relief that applies here is something called Business Property Relief, or BPR. That has been again restricted, not in terms of to whom it will apply, so it will continue to apply to Alkimi, but only to the extent of a cap now of £1 million. Obviously, as Alkimi continues to grow, while $1 million sounds like a big number, in the grand scheme of a business, it's not. So we will very quickly exceed, or we have actually already exceeded that value, which means we will eventually end up paying a greater tax liability. If people do have specific queries on the tax, then Chorley and I are always more than happy to deal with those. I mean, you can see the joy on Chorley's face for those of you who've got video. This is his happy face. This is not the face of a man who a couple of hours ago literally was standing at the front of a queue. It's market day here in London for a sign saying sold out to be put up just literally as he was the next man in the queue. There was definite anger. No, in fact, if I'm going to be completely honest with everybody, Chorley left. Chorley said, I'm going to go and find somewhere else. And luckily he made it back to see you guys. But if it wasn't for you, he might still be wandering the streets.
From a more broad pro-crypto perspective as well, obviously the standard crypto events are still happening with the UK government. It just happens to be a different UK government, and there has been a new person put in place who is actually a lot more probably specialist in the fintech space. They put crypto in underneath the person who's in charge of fintech, so that even from itself is quite an interesting place for it to live, because I think before it was just generally a part of like the Department of Business, which is quite broad focused and not necessarily top priority. So yeah, having it move into that kind of fintech space makes kind of more sense for a lot of crypto anyway, as long as we don't start getting regulated by the FCA, because we're an ad tech business rather than trying to replace banking, which I think a lot of crypto is probably guilty of.
Yeah, I think that's one major advantage that Alkimi has I was actually asked this question, I think it was only yesterday. We were actually dealing with the US, and we will come on to talk about the US shortly. But the question was around FATCA, which is a US disclosure facility involved in what are called FFIs, or foreign financial institutions. And one of the great things about Alkimi is because we are a real world asset based business, we don't need to worry. We are not a financial intermediary. We are not a finance company. So things like FSMA or the FCA, crypto isn't the only walk of life why there's acronyms, by the way. We do exist in others, but Financial Conduct Authority, the Financial Services and Markets Act, we don't have to comply with them. We are not caught within them. But Chorley makes a really interesting point here that the Department for Business and Trade has now got almost effectively a specialist crypto subdivision. And we have been very clear now for some time, our work with the UK Crypto Business Asset Council, Stand with Crypto and others, that we, in whatever small way we can, want Alkimi to be at the forefront of helping drive the UK crypto business trade. And I know that a lot of you listen to our podcasts and our lab talks. You know, Katie Ramsey, who is the head of fintech for the Department of Business and Trade, so literally the lady who is now basically overseeing crypto asset regulation for the government, is going to be one of our guests. In addition to Katie, if one wasn't good enough, we have two, because we are also going to have Lisa Cameron, who is obviously very, very well known in political circles and was part of the previous government's Crypto Council Advisory Board, who are going to be guests of ours. And so those are two upcoming events that you should definitely tune into. They will be fascinating, irrespective of your love of Alkimi. These will be of interest to anybody who wants to work or be involved or invest in crypto assets in the UK. I think probably that's covering most of what we want to cover with the tax and the budget. As I say, I know it is a particular interest to me, but it's not quite so interesting to everybody else.
It's important for everybody in the UK anyway, from when they do come to sell their cryptos, that they know what's going on, because they're going to find you at some point, so you've got to pay it.
Yeah, and they were very clear about that. For example, they've put up the interest rates, despite the fact that the UK Bank of England today announced a reduction in national interest rates, down from 5% to 4.75%. That happened a couple of hours ago. We really are at the cutting edge of news here. I actually do some work occasionally as well. But there is going to be an increase in tax paid that is late, or effectively an increase in interest on tax that is paid. So it is important for anybody who invests to make sure that they do understand their own personal tax and regulatory requirements. As you know, anyone who's read Alkimi's terms and conditions, which are on our website, one of the conditions is that you are responsible for your own filings and tax. We're always around to help you with queries of a generic nature, but you should all seek specialist advice if you think it is necessary. Chorley, before we sort of move to the US, what do you think is the general sentiment regarding advertising? I mean, it's much more your area than mine. There's been a lot about Google and Netflix and everything else recently. What's your general view on the desire for the sort of ad-funded internet at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously a big US government versus Google case going on at the moment, but that in itself is there's a lot of detail in it. I've gone through pretty much every day of it so far, and we are actually waiting for an opinion from the judge about what's going to happen. But there is a lot of dry bits within that about how they may or may not have given themselves preferential treatment within the ad tech space. But more broadly, there's a lot of people looking for solutions to that situation. I think most people are aware of the way that Google works and the fact that it is so large, and actually independent ad tech is probably already making gains from that situation. Things like head bidding were a good example of that. But a lot of the more independent ad tech businesses are seeing a lot of gains with big brands, ourselves included, thanks to the prompt there. But I think that generally through the ad tech space, it's been like the numbers are going up year on year. It's always growing by around 15% a year, which is massive for any industry. And the Google situation aside, that means the pie is always getting bigger. And if there was to be a situation where the recommendation was they should be broken up, and it might happen in the next 12 to 18 months, then the amount of pie available for everyone gets a lot larger as well. So I think there's always an appetite for digital advertising. The way it works is slowly changing, but generally people are kind of doing things how Google did them before, but they're trying to get around that situation. And then every agency is really looking at things like SPO, which is supply path optimization, as the next big thing for them to be able to sell into their clients, because their clients are now aware of the fact that their money is not getting spent where they think it's getting spent, which obviously plays into Alkimi's hands massively, because we have full transparency and immutability on the blockchain, which does give us a really big, unique selling point in the market.
Yeah, no, I think, we talk about the 600 billion, we talk about $1 trillion by the end of the decade, if not sooner. The numbers are astronomical, although, to be honest, all this talk of pies is actually making me quite hungry. When we were chatting about this afternoon's talk, I said the one question I most expected to be asked is indeed the first question in the comments. So while it isn't quite Q&A, I am actually going to take it. For those who don't have access to the comment section, what it says is, "Hi Mark, how do you think the US election will affect Alkimi entering the USA market? Could it be sooner than we thought, 2025? So Alkimi is already doing business in the US. One of the less interesting jobs that I have done this year is to ensure that our privacy policies and our terms and conditions are US compliant. We've engaged lawyers in the US to review these, assist these, make the amendments where necessary. Many of you will know that we have a number of US clients already using the exchange. We had another meeting today to talk about how October looked, and the numbers for October were substantially better than they had been the month previously. We are literally going from strength to strength, which sadly for me means I'm literally going from contract to contract. At least most of them are in English, I think. Some of the drafting is a bit shoddy, but I can say that the 2 contracts I've reviewed in the last 24 hours, have been in different jurisdictions, and again shows the general growth. What I would say is that it has always been our intention that once our exposure to the US market grows to a significant size, that we will open an office in the US. I think the result of the election has merely reinforced that, in that I think if we want to do business in the US on a regular basis to a reasonable size, then we will need to have a physical office there. Whether that happens in the next 12 months is dependent on too many factors at the moment. I would say that I would be very surprised if we didn't have one there by the end of 2026. But whether we have one by the end of 2025 at the moment, it is unclear. But we are going to spend more time over there. We are having more meetings over there. Some of you will have come across our Chief Strategy Officer, Raman. He's very, very keen on expanding that US horizon, and he would be the person to give you that sort of detail.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning as well that we have partnerships in place that have started in the UK and Europe, but they also tend to roll over from this region to the US. And some of those might be with advertisers and some might be with publishers. So there is already supply and demand going on for Alkimi in that region. So it's really a case of how quickly that grows and making sure that it's sustainable for us to move over there and have an office over there. So those things will all kind of develop over the next kind of couple of quarters probably, but the ad tech industry in the UK specifically and semi-Europe as well is as advanced as the US in terms of technology. There's maybe a slight lag of a quarter or so, but generally everything that happens there ends up happening here. So it actually works as quite a good, almost like training ground, academy sort of area to go to the US, but then that's where the numbers get much bigger, both in terms of deal size and running costs as well.
Yeah.
So it's not kind of just as simple as like, let's open an office. You have to service it and have people working in it and making sure everybody's doing good work as well. So there's lots of moving parts to making that happen, but it is probably simpler coming from the UK and going to the US than probably almost anywhere else in the world, which is always positive.
Yeah, and I think for Alkimi, the take-home point of the recent US elections is that we have seen record numbers, by a ridiculous margin, record numbers of pro-crypto individuals being elected to the House of Representatives, to the Senate. You know, I think you and I, Chorley, were reading, was it 262 or something that they reckon have been?
Yeah, and then there's also kind of almost every state bar about 3 has got at least one pro member for crypto in there, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah, because we've already mentioned obviously the work we do with Standard Crypto, which is spearheaded by Coinbase, both in the US and the UK, and these are the sorts of data metrics that they are providing us, showing, you know, this massive popularization of blockchain technology. You know, these are people who get it, who want to see this area grow. You know, in the US, we've already mentioned people like Katie Ramsey, who's going to be one of our guests, wanting to see it grow in the UK. So the UK-US special relationship is continuing in crypto. I think we have already seen the markets react in terms of the values of Bitcoin and ETH over the last 24 hours. Yeah, I'm not a market expert. I can't tell you whether we've gone from bears to bulls to rabbits to squirrels or anything else. But, you know, it is all looking positive. And this really does give Alkimi, as well as many, many other blockchain-based businesses, a real springboard to launch into 2025. I certainly know that even in the last 24 hours, interest with parties that we have been in discussions with, in some cases for several months, have been accelerated. You know, contracts have suddenly appeared in my inbox. I think I've mentioned before how much I love contracts. You know, so, you know, there is now, I think there might have been a pause, or at least if not a formal pause. You know, any time of uncertainty, people tend to hold back, you know, on making big decisions. But now that we do know how the US political system is going to look, I think a lot of business that has been slowly trickling in, perhaps, or slower than we would ideally like, has already seen a significant increase in pace. I guess, Joe, you know, you've been in advertising and crypto for longer than I have. I mean, you're much better to be the oracle here. What do you see for the start of 2025?
Well, I think what is interesting is I did actually recently read a book about the .com boom, and the similarities are, you know, quite obvious. I think we will talk about the fact that it's never the same, but it rhymes, and it's basically a very similar situation. I think people view blockchain technology and, you know, to a greater or lesser extent AI as well as part of that, as the next big like growth for any economy. When you think like the growth of like the .com era from maybe like 94 to 2001 when the bubble did burst, that's a very long period of time. And, you know, we're quite used to in crypto having like 4-year cycles, pretty much based on the Bitcoin halving. But that is a very long extended run, and most of that is because VCs start investing more money into those businesses. Those businesses scale up. For very less extent, some of those didn't end up doing anything. There's some very famous examples of like Pets.com, Priceline, things like that. I think Priceline still exists, but and then there were the ones that made it through that, which I think is like Amazon and eBay, which are like household names now. So there's that interesting period of institutional money coming into the space via ETFs, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum ETFs. But then that M&A situation, which probably will occur afterwards, will bring a lot of money into businesses that have an actual utility, that are going to generate revenue in a way that obviously only Bitcoin's not going to do. There's not going to be Goldman Sachs investing in Pepe, hopefully not. But there will be them looking at businesses that are using the technology to solve a problem that can disrupt an industry in a space and actually make a difference in it. And that's basically what happens, through that period of the dot-com boom. It was, the internet's going to disrupt everything, it's amazing. And then it's like, okay, but how much of it is actually going to change an industry, and how much of it is just superfluous use of the internet, or in our example, blockchain, and how much of it is the blockchain actually making a difference to the outcomes that you get that will disrupt an industry. So I think that over the next 10 years, it's going to look very different to the way it did for the last 10 years. We wouldn't have, the first 10 years has almost certainly been people getting used to the technology, developers getting involved with it, building cool things with it to prove that it actually has value. But there was quite a good news survey, Nagro that basically the reason that Uber works is because it's a myriad technology. There's lots of different things that work together to make the Uber app work. And within the blockchain space, there's been a lot of those single things have been built. So those libraries for those things exist, and people need to now build like applications that exist on top of blockchains for it to make sense as a business. And I think that is probably where we're headed. And I think having a lot more eyes on the blockchain space will definitely make that happen quicker.
Yeah.
Ultimately, institutions will get involved.
I mean, as a vain individual, I quite worry how I might look in 10 years' time, but I think that's probably down to the donuts rather than anything else.
Faceless, mate, it'll be great.
Yeah, it's not quite the view I'm going for, but hopefully this afternoon, or at least this afternoon as far as we're concerned, although looking out the window, which is behind Chorley's, you can see it's basically night time.
It's got darker and darker. It's 20 minutes and it's now night time.
Yeah, hopefully today's given you an idea of our views on the future from a UK and from a US perspective. We are very excited. The company is, as you've seen from the Q2, Q3 revenue growth, it is growing at a very fast rate. Obviously, we do have to take that into account when we look at our plans for 2025. Nothing in the course of the last couple of weeks with the budget and the elections has really concerned us from a company perspective. And, we will continue to, see what changes. I am slightly geekishly, I guess, very excited to have both Dr. Cameron and Katie Ramsey coming on the show. I will try not to ask too many questions. I'll fail, but I will do my best. And as always, if anyone has any queries, please look us up on Telegram. Put a chat in messages or on X or anything else. And otherwise, all it is for us is to wish you all a very pleasant evening, or afternoon or morning, depending on where you are.
Yeah, we'll be in the Telegram channels. So whenever we're in there, just any questions you got, just fire them over. Don't be shy. Sometimes when I post in there, people suddenly go quiet. But
they don't go quiet when I post.
Yeah.
You're more official than I am.
They know you're the weak spot.
I am. I'm the.
Running mouth.
Yeah, that's why we have to have briefings. I have a list that you can't see. It's like, Mark, do not mention this, or this. Which, for somebody who does like to share, I'm all about transparency. That's why I'm in blockchain. It is somewhat difficult, but as you know, when we know, we can tell you we always will. Otherwise, thank you ever so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks everyone.